How can I be happy? Wow, what a question. It's actually a very good question to ask yourself every day. How can I be happy is considerably more useful than why am I unhappy? Now, we're going to jump into a little bit of coaching here, but it's one of the simplest distinctions to make inside of coaching, but it is actually one of the most important, right? So for instance, why am I unhappy? Let's take a moment to guess what will happen if we ask ourselves that question. Well, we will find an answer, right? So if we're asking ourselves, why am I unhappy? Then you're going to be able to give yourself a whole series of answers as to why you're unhappy, therefore reinforcing the fact that we're feeling unhappy and giving us evidence to prove the reasons as to why we're feeling unhappy, and therefore creating a downward cycle of feeling more and more and more unhappy. So if you were to do what Aileen does every day and actually flip the question and ask, how can I be happy? Then once again, your brain is going to work to find you an answer. So if you're looking for answers to how can I be happy, then even if it's a struggle, even if it takes a while, even if it doesn't feel natural, that is what will be presented to us. Ways in which we can be happy. Now, we're going to be talking about some of those ways today, but one thing I really want to say as a distinction is that this topic quite clearly is incredibly vast, right? This is a vast topic with lots of detail, lots of twists and turns, lots of possibilities, lots of different avenues in which we could go down, lots of different opinions, lots of different unique elements that make an individual person uniquely happy that lots of other people won't be able to relate to. There's a lot to this topic. There's absolutely no doubt about it. There is a reason as to why people spend their whole lives trying to work this out. There's a reason as to why people write multiple books on this topic and do multiple trainings and coach people solely on this topic. So, can we possibly uncover every element that there is that we could possibly uncover within the space of 45 minutes within one podcast episode? No, we can't, but we will get as close as we can. Now, not as close as we can to uncovering all of the elements because it will take years, but as close as we can to just answering the question. How can I be happy? Now, what's interesting about this is that I've split this into 3 different categories, right? The 3 categories that I have split today's topic into are known as external, internal, and in the middle, right? Semi-external, semi-internal, right? So let's refer to it as external, semi, and internal, right? So let's start with external. Now, the thing is, this is where most people go. This is where people's mind tends to wander to when you're talking about the topic of becoming happier. And the reason for that is because when we're talking about the topic of becoming happier, a lot of the time what we're talking about and referring to internally is our mood. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? Because our mood essentially is just, it's a more layman's term version of talking about our emotional state. Now our emotional state is how we're feeling in any one particular moment. And emotional states, they change. They change on a daily basis. They change multiple times a day. Sometimes they can change within the same minute, the same 30 seconds, the same 1 second. We can go from the emotional state of feeling exhilarated and then feel depressed. We can go from the emotional state of anxiety, feeling anxious, and then feeling confident. And that comes down to what we're thinking in terms of the images inside our heads, our internal dialogue, our body posture. We know this, right? I've done multiple podcast episodes leading up to this one talking about those 3 things, and we know how important they are when it comes to judging and analyzing and understanding and changing our emotional state. But one thing that I really want to highlight here is that our emotional state, happiness is one of those, okay? Now, feeling happy is an emotional state. It can also be seen as an end destination, and that makes sense as well because it's the place in which we're trying to get to. But if we stop thinking about it like an end destination and we start thinking about it like an emotional state in which we have access to whenever we want, then it's a lot less intimidating. It's a lot less scary. And also it makes it a lot more achievable. Now I'm just going to say that one more time. If we stop thinking about happiness like an end result, a destination in which we are trying to get to, and we start to realize that it is simply one of multiple emotional states that we have immediate access to whenever we want it and whenever we need it. We just need to figure out what the formula is for that emotional state. Then it makes the whole thing a lot less intimidating and a lot more achievable, right? Now, formula is a very, very important word in which I just shared, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, because one thing that a lot of people completely overlook is that we have formulas for emotional state. There are certain ingredients that have to be mixed in a certain order, in a certain way, for a certain period of time in order for the oven to go ding and we've baked a cake. But we've not really baked a cake. We've created a particular emotional state. But it's not unlike baking a cake, right? Now, I'll give you an example. If you want to bake a cake, what you'll have is you'll have certain ingredients, right? Now, those ingredients may be sugar, flour, eggs. You get the picture, right? A little bit of water. Now, those ingredients on their own are not enough to be able to bake a cake, right? We know this, we understand this. Those ingredients on their own by themselves are just a collection of ingredients. They're a collection of individual things that alone do not make a cake. In order to make a cake, you need these ingredients. Now, these ingredients completely on their own by themselves do not make a cake, right? They don't. They're individual elements that we need to put together in a certain way, at a certain temperature, at a certain time, in a certain order to get the result that we want. And the result is the cake. Emotional states are exactly the same. There are certain things that can contribute towards us feeling a particular way. But when you focus on those things individually, in isolation, they are not enough in order to create an emotional state within us. So let's break this down, right? What am I actually talking about here? Now, what I'm talking about primarily, before we move on to happiness, I'm primarily talking about the huge misconception that people make when they think they just feel a certain way. And there's no explanation for it. There's no reason for it. It's just how I'm feeling. Now, that's not necessarily true. In that immediate moment, it just means that we don't know what the formula is. We don't know what has happened up until this point to create that emotional state. And therefore, because we're not aware of it, we are under the impression that it just is what it is. Now, that's the equivalent of me baking a cake, showing it to someone, and someone saying to me, "How did you bake that cake?" And me saying, "I have no idea. It just is what it is. It just happened one day. One day, this cake all of a sudden just existed in my life. And I don't know why it exists. I don't know where it comes from. And therefore, it must mean that it doesn't come from anywhere. It must mean that there isn't kind of any ingredients or formula that's gone into making it. It just is what it is. It's just there. It's just been presented to me." Now, we know that is an impossibility. And in order for that cake to exist, there needs to have been ingredients that were mixed together at a certain velocity, in a certain time, in a certain order, at a certain temperature, in order for that to be an end result. This is exactly the same. So let me give you an example. When I am feeling down and when I'm feeling depressed, which can happen to me, right? I'm not immune to this. I'm a human being. When I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling depressed, when I feel like I've got a lack of energy, and all of those things, right, that a lot of people experience on a consistent basis, but just make the assumption, well, I don't know, it's just how I'm feeling, it must be me, and therefore this is just my life. They are completely failing to backtrack and look at all of the things that are contributing, or refusing to look at the things that are contributing towards that. I'll give you a great example. I know the ingredients that contribute towards the formula for depression for me, right? Now, those ingredients are lack of sleep, lack of food, not being outside, engaging in conversation, which is purely focused on things that are going wrong in the world or putting other people down, not focusing on the future, not focusing on potential and what could be built, but instead focusing on the elements of my life in which I had improved at a younger age, and also focusing on the failures in which I've had and the things that have not worked out for me. These are but some of the ingredients, right? Now, a lot of this stuff can happen completely subconsciously. A lot of this stuff can just completely happen, can pass you by on a daily basis, and we don't realize that we're engaging with these things. But really what we've got there is we've got a collection of very, very specific ingredients that create a very specific emotional state, right? I also know some of my key ingredients for happiness, right? Some of the key ingredients for me for happiness are spending time with my family uninterrupted, without any interruptions whatsoever, and I have sole focus on them. Being outside, being in the sun, exercising, getting enough sleep. These are all things that are like, some of them are internal, some of them are external. Focusing on my top 5 core values, living life according to those values, making sure that I'm focused on gratitude and some of the things that come with that, spending time with a community of people that I feel are like-minded, who also really, really want to care for others and who really want to do good in this world. I could list loads and loads and loads and loads and loads, but what we need to realize is that they are simply ingredients, much like the ingredients that you use to bake a cake. They are just ingredients that then create an emotional state. So why am I talking about this? Because when we ask the question, how can I be happy? The first thing that we absolutely must understand is that happiness is simply an emotional state, and that emotional state can be created with the right ingredients if you know what they are. That's why I'm talking about that. So I'm just going to say that one more time, okay? Because it's really important. So when we're asking ourselves the question, how can I be happy? What we need to realize is that happiness is simply an emotional state. And in order to achieve that emotional state, all we need to do is put together a certain amount of ingredients that work for us. So ultimately, we need to know what those ingredients are. Without knowing what those ingredients are, we live by hope that one day they may accidentally happen and they may accidentally mix together within the right way, in the right order, at the right velocity, in order for us to feel the emotional state. Now, I don't know about you, but as nice as hope is as an emotional state, because that is another emotional state, and as useful as hope can be in certain situations, I don't want my entire life to be determined by hope. Hope is a very, very pleasant emotional state that can fill us with certain emotions and feelings that really, really do feel good at times, right? And it can be a very useful emotional state within certain times of our lives. But it's not the emotional state that I want to build my entire life on. I don't want things in my life to be determined by that one emotional state being hope. Therefore, if I want to feel happy, then what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to calculate the ingredients required in order for me to feel that emotional state. I am fully 100% on board with the idea that we are a direct part of nature, right? This is going to sound like I'm digressing, but I'm not. I am fully on board with the fact that we are a direct part of nature, and that being in nature and accepting ourselves as a part of nature is an important thing, because it's where we've come from. We've grown from this planet, right? But at the same time, the universe that we live in is very heavily based around calculation, right? There's a lot of mathematics going on around us on a constant, consistent basis. So I'm a firm believer that you can still be at one with nature whilst at the same time understanding that we are essentially living inside one huge math calculation. And therefore, if we can understand the calculations that are going on around us, then we can personally benefit from that and we can help other people. Why am I talking about that? I'm talking about that because so many people think that because emotional states are natural, it must mean that they are absolutely correct, right? Let me just say that one more time. So many people think that just because emotional states are natural, it must mean that they are absolutely correct. And it must mean that that is exactly what we need in that moment at that time. Now, my viewpoint on this, all emotional states are natural, right? All of them. Every single emotional state that we experience is natural, and it's a natural part of the human experience. To feel sadness as well as happiness, to feel anger as well as love, to feel jealousy as well as comfort, right? Now, the viewpoint is that there are no good or bad emotional states. However, once again, we are very much living inside of this mathematic calculation, and in the same aspect that there is a positive and a negative end to a magnet, there is a positive and a negative end to emotional states. There is no fucking doubt about that whatsoever, right? The feeling of devastation and pain that you feel when you've lost a loved one suddenly, violently, unexpectedly, on no level could be considered an utterly positive emotional state. There isn't anyone that I've ever met that would ever say that pain and anguish that I felt when I lost that individual was one of the most positive experiences of my life. It's one of the most natural experiences due to naturally feeling those feelings and those emotions when put in that situation. But much like a magnet having a positive end and a negative end, emotional states most definitely have a positive and a negative. So why is that important that we're talking about that? Well, that's important because if we have that understanding, then we have slightly more control over the emotional states that we choose to experience more often than not. Give you a great example. I know that it is a completely natural part of the human experience to experience sadness and depression. However, I don't want it. I don't enjoy it. I don't welcome it with open arms. I don't fucking embrace it when it's there. I don't want that as part of my life. I fully am aware that I will have elements of that and I'll have that experience. But I feel as there is this almost a denial of the mathematic equation that we are living inside at the moment, where we say, if I'm experiencing something, that must absolutely be the thing I need to be experiencing in that moment at that time. The slippery slope there, the really slippery slope there, is when we find ourselves experiencing an emotional state that we don't want, that we don't like, that doesn't serve us, that doesn't help us, that's not useful for us, and we allow that emotional state to go on and on and on and on and on because we have not changed the ingredients. We haven't looked at the ingredients that are creating that emotional state, and we haven't been empowered enough to change them. And therefore, we have let it drag on and on and on for years under the guise that it must be what we need at that time. This must be how I should be feeling. And therefore, I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to fuck with it. I'm just going to let it happen. That is the equivalent of having an abusive partner and saying, I'm not going to change this because it must be what has to be happening at the moment. That's like having a friend who is constantly putting you down all the time and constantly calling you shit and constantly saying you're worth nothing and constantly making you feel really bad about yourself and saying, yeah, but because that's happening right now, it must be what I need. That must be the experience in which I must have at the moment. And therefore, I'm not going to do anything about it. Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you've got a mate who's constantly putting you down and making you feel like shit, ditch that mate. Ditch that friend, right? If you've got a partner who's fucking putting you down all the time, ditch that partner, right? It's an equation. The whole thing is an equation. It's like 1 + 1 = 2, right? Something plus something equals something. So emotional states are no different. They're no fucking different. If we're feeling an emotional state, it's due to some form of equation. It's not just random. It's not just popped up out of nowhere. There's just no explanation for it. It must just be me. There's reasons, right? There's reasons. So with that being said, what I want all of you to do as coaching masters is I want you, and for those people listening to the podcast for the first time, what we're going to be talking about is what we are talking about is coaching. It's what we're going to continue to talk about, because through coaching, we are the decision makers. We're the architects. We're the builders. We are not the ones that allow the universe, people, places, things, events. We're not allowing others to dictate to us what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're doing. We're the architects. We're the decision makers. We're the ones that take empowerment to say, I'm going to change this in which I do not like. Something doesn't fit right with me, that makes me feel bad, it puts me down, it makes me feel sad, I feel unempowered, I feel weak, I feel jealous, I feel angry, I feel these emotional states that other people will say, yeah, but don't change it, don't fuck with it, because it's obviously natural. It is natural, but in the same way that a magnet has a positive end and a negative end, one of them is desirable and one of them is not. Right? Now, I've fully embraced that idea and I'm fully aware of it. So I know that all emotional states are natural, and at the same time, it does not mean that they are all desirable, and it certainly does not mean that they're all useful, right? Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time, if I've experienced an emotional state in which I would consider a negative emotional state, right? There's so much about that not being a thing, how there's no negative ones, there's no positive ones, there's no good ones, there's no bad ones. And that is literally just like saying there is no end of a magnet that is positive or negative. They're both exactly the same, but it's literally not true. In relation to the universe we live in, it's just not the case. And I don't know about you, but those emotional states that I've experienced in the past that I would consider to be negative emotional states, those times in my life where I have felt utterly jealous, right? I cannot tell you one time where that's been useful. Those times in my life where I've been really utterly overcome with anger, right? Or overcome with fear, or I've been overcome with frustration, or I've been overcome with sadness and depression. I cannot also tell you why those were really, really useful at the time and resulted in very sound decisions, which I look back on years later and say, God, I'm glad I made that decision. Or I'm so glad I made that decision when I was in my height of jealousy. Oh, I tell you what, I'm so happy I made that snap decision when I was fucking angry. You know what? I'm so happy to look back on that time in my life where I was really sad and really depressed and I was making all of those really sound decisions because of that, right? Yet, if we look at those emotional states on the other end of the spectrum, the ones we would consider positive emotional states, happiness, exhilaration, freedom, love, comfort, community, welcoming, warmth. Then a lot of the time I'll look back on those times in my life and I'll say those were the best times of my life. That's when things were operating at a high standard. I was feeling good. Everyone around me was feeling good. That's when I was making all the best decisions, right? So because of that, what I want to be doing is I want to be helping people create those emotional states which they would prefer to have, right? More often than not. So let's talk about this thing that we spoke about earlier in terms of things being external, things being kind of internal, and things being a bit in the middle. Now, that question, how can I be happy? How can I create that emotional state of happiness? What I want you guys to do is I want you guys to start to come up with your own formula, your own calculation for happiness. I don't want it to just be a random thing. I don't want you to have to wait for hope or wait for chance. And I don't want you in times where you really wish you felt happy, but you're not, to accept that because that must just be naturally the way that you should be feeling at the time. I want you to take some ownership over it. I want you to take some control over it. And the way in which we do that is with ingredients and formulas, right? So for instance, the first part of the formula, the first collection of ingredients that I want you to think about are external ingredients. Now, external ingredients are those things that exist outside of your internal world. These are physical things that exist in the physical world, right? I'll give you some examples to start you off. Take these examples if they apply to you, but by no means in any way think that this is the list of things that you need, right? External things such as smiling. Right? Smiling is one of those things that is an external thing that has an effect on your internal world. When you put a smile on your face, biofeedback sends messages from the muscles in your face through the nervous system straight up to the brain to remind your brain that what you're doing now is you're feeling happy. That's a very simple external thing that becomes one of the key ingredients to the overall formula for happiness, okay? Now, things like exercise, moving your body, they say motion creates emotion. Lack of it creates a lack of it. A lack of motion creates a lack of emotion. Heightened motion creates heightened emotion, right? Moving the body, exercising the muscles, exercising the respiratory system that we have that makes up this physical person who we are. Diet, what you eat, the water that you drink. Now, these are physical, external things. Now, what I want you to do is I really want all of you to try to create not an exhaustive list of things that you think could go into a formula for happiness. I want you to recognize and understand the things that go into your formula for happiness. And the way in which we do that is I want you to think back on the times in your life where you felt so utterly happy, just outrageously happy, when you just felt a little bit happy, just any level of happiness where you look back and you think, that's how I felt. And maybe you're feeling it right now. Maybe you're feeling happy because we're engaging in this conversation. And I'm going to come onto that in a minute because that's one of those semi-internal, external things. The clue is in the history, right? The clue is in the actual experience that you have had and maybe are having that will tell you what those external ingredients are that contribute towards your state of happiness. Think back to when you were happy when you were a kid. What externally was happening at the time that contributed towards that state of happiness? What about happiness throughout your young years or your teenage years or your young adult years? What about happiness that you experienced yesterday or last year or maybe what you're experiencing right now? You have to be asking yourself, what is happening in my external world that is contributing towards the emotional state of happiness? Create an exhaustive list, but not an exhaustive list of things that you just think could be added to the list randomly. Create an exhaustive list of things for you, things that work for you, right? That's really, really, really important. Then what I want you to do is I want you to think about the things that kind of live in both the internal and the external world. Now, what I mean by that is, for instance, I'll give you a great example, and we're all doing one of them right now. One of them, for me, and just remember, I can only ever talk to you from my point of view, right? For me, is connection. One of those ones that kind of lives a little bit internally, but a little bit externally is connection with other people. Now, why is that in the middle and it's not just ultimately an external thing or an internal thing? Because externally, you need to be able to connect with people, whether that's in the way that we're doing it right now or whether it's you being physically in the same spot as someone. But that then has a direct effect on what you do internally, like how you interact with yourself internally in order to prepare yourself on how you're going to interact with other people externally. When you create a connection with someone, there is an internal and an external thing that is happening, right? It's not literally just like a straight up as external, put a smile on your face, drink some water, exercise, that kind of thing. Creating a connection with someone, you externally, physically in some way need to create that connection with another person. But internally, the connection that you're creating with the other person is generating emotions and feelings inside of you that are contributing towards the state of happiness. So with the ones that we call semi, that are kind of like a little bit, they've kind of got one foot in both camps. They very much could be considered totally external things or totally internal things. But these are the ones that I kind of feel like just have a little bit too much of both to fully go into either of those two camps, right? So for instance, to give you another example, another thing that's kind of in both camps, which is very much linked to connection, is conversation, right? For me, conversation is undoubtedly one of those ingredients that create the formula for happiness for me, right? Now, once again, you may very well relate to these and you may not, right? And either one of those is cool. If you relate to them, put them on your list. If you don't, leave them off your list. But again, one of the main things that I'm trying to get everybody to do here is I want everybody to come up with their own list. of external things, internal things, and things that have a little bit of a combination of both, right? Conversation is huge for me. It's absolutely huge. Now, I know for a fact that in those moments in which I am feeling the emotional state of depression, the emotional state of sadness, not any of the emotional states I don't want, but those kind of ones that surround that very, very typical sensation of being sad or being depressed that lots of people experience on a daily basis, I know that there is a direct correlation between that and me having a lack of conversation. I know that to be fact because I've looked into it and I've done the calculations and I've looked at the ingredients and I've seen the correlation, right? I can see the correlation between when I am not talking to people for an extended period of time, the emotional state of depression starts to show itself because one of the ingredients that I have for the emotional state of depression is solitude and being on my own and not engaging in energetic, high vibe conversation, right? When I'm not engaged with that, then I can start to experience the emotional state of depression. What I really want to emphasize this because this is actually so very, very important, right? Now, the trap that we fall into is that we allow other people to label us because what it does is it gives us a complete get out of jail free card. When a doctor or anyone else labels us as depressed or anxious, a depressed person, an anxious person, then what we're doing is we're taking that and saying, well, this is the reason. So now I can just kick back and not do anything about that. I'm going to take this because it's easier to accept that and just take it and say, this is my reason. This is the reason for the way that I'm feeling. And therefore, this is the most amount of exploration I need to do on that. I don't need to do any more exploration around the reasons as to why I'm feeling this way because I've been given this title like a fucking name badge. Hello, my name is depressed person. Hello, my name is anxious person. I've got my reason now. I've got my name tag. I don't do any more exploration. I then think about that and say, well, hang on a minute. That's just how I'm feeling at the moment, in this immediate moment. Why? What are the reasons for that? What is contributing towards that feeling? And if I dig into that a little bit further, I'll realize that one of the reasons I'm feeling that sense of depression in that moment is partly due to solitude, right? But I can only come to that conclusion once I've done the fucking calculation. I can only come to that conclusion when I've taken the time to ask myself the question, what are the ingredients to the emotional state that I am currently experiencing that I don't want? And if I don't take the time to make that exploration or do that exploration and answer those questions, I can very easily fall into the trap of thinking, well, that's just me, right? That's just me. In that case, that must be who I am. Sue's just said in the comments there, a diagnosis is not the verdict. Exactly, right? You determine the fucking verdict. And the verdict, that what you're feeling is made up of ingredients. There are fucking ingredients to everything that is made. There are ingredients that go into, we're using this cake as an example, right? This cake is a simple example. But a cake does not come out of nowhere. It doesn't just fucking go ding in the oven and all of a sudden everyone's like, where the fuck did that come from? There's a cake all of a sudden. Someone's made the cake, right? And in order to make the cake, they've used the ingredients. The emotional state doesn't fucking just come out of nowhere, right? No matter how easy it is for organizations to sell us lots of drugs in order to say, no, just this is the thing that you've got. This is you. This is who you are. So you better buy this thing from me. The ingredients, the key is in the fucking ingredients, right? So for instance, whenever I want to experience the emotional state of happiness and I want that in my life at that time, I'm breaking down the ingredients, right? So I'm thinking externally, what are the external ingredients I need? Right, I need to go outside. I need to drink more water. I need to get more sleep. I need to exercise. Those are the physical, external world ingredients in which I need, not everybody, the ones that I need. Then I'm thinking to myself, right, what are those ingredients that are kind of both internal and external, right? Well, I need to make sure that I have created a connection, right? I need to make sure I've created connections with other people. I need to make sure I'm having good, high vibe conversation about the future and what potential we have as human beings. I need to make sure that I'm around my community, my people, the people that I know are on the same journey as me. I need to engage in something that is charitable or caring, something that is going to add value to other people's lives. So it's good for them, but at the same time, I'm also getting that feel-good vibe buzz that I need. I need to make sure that I'm around my family more. I need to make sure, and when I say family, I'm talking about my wife and my daughter. That's my family, right? So whenever I say the word family, I'm talking about those two individuals. I need to be around my wife more. I need to be around my daughter more. Now, these are my ingredients. So when I engage in those ingredients, it's no fucking wonder that all of a sudden I start to experience the emotional state of happiness, which is what I want, right? Now, one of the biggest problems is when people engage in ingredients that they think they should have as ingredients for their emotional state of happiness, instead of ingredients that they actually want. So people a lot of the time will engage within ingredients that don't resonate with them due to feeling obliged to do so, right? I'll give you a great example. Someone might listen to what I just said and say, oh God, I should actually spend more time with my family then, in that case, if I want to be happy. And that might not be what makes you happy. That might not be the thing that makes you happy, right? In which case, just because I've said it, it doesn't mean it's your ingredient. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. This is for you to really, fully, truly, honestly, openly, genuinely embrace the idea of what makes you happy, right? Internally, externally even, and kind of internally and externally. Now, internally, purely internally, let's go there, right? Values, beliefs, gratitude. Values, beliefs, gratitude. Now, anyone that has done our coaching courses here, you will understand what I'm talking about, right? Now, if you're listening to this on the podcast, if you're listening to this inside of Coaching Mastery, you've not yet signed up to the Coaching Masters membership. You're crazy. I don't know where you've been. Make sure you sign up. And for those members that have not yet enrolled onto the Coaching Masters 12-week coaching accreditation program, you have to fucking do that ASAP, right? Because we cover all of this. We talk about all of this, but it's always good to have a reminder. Values. What is important to you? Now, one of the key elements of being happy is understanding what your core values are, right? And then living life in accordance to those values. The first part of that process is having a fully true, rich understanding of what is important to you in your life. What do you deem to be important? What do you value very, very, very highly? I'll tell you some of my core values, right? Some of my core values are freedom, progression, my loved ones, confidence. These are some of the core values that I know I need to embrace, right? I want to embrace the feeling of confidence. I want to embrace having a life of freedom. I want to embrace being around my loved ones. You've just got to find out what are the things that are most important to me in this life. And you need to endeavor to live life in accordance to those core values, right? Those core values. You have to do that because when you live a life that rejects or neglects your core values, you will be unhappy. And when you live a life in accordance to your core values, you will be happy. This is as close to a formula for happiness as possible, right? This is as close as you will get as a straight up soundproof formula for happiness. Most people are scared to talk about this because they think happiness is fleeting. They think it comes and goes. They think it's random. They think you're lucky if you've got it. And a lot of people have a firm belief that the vast majority of people on this earth are actually just very unhappy and that's the way it works. We must crack the formula, and I'm giving you the fucking formula right now. The formula is this. Really think about it and really feel it and really figure out what are the external things that contribute towards you feeling happy, right? Is that smiling? Is it doing exercise? Is it having a good diet? Is it getting enough sleep? Is it that stuff? Then you got to think, what are those things that kind of are internal and external, right? Is it connection with other people? Is it conversation? Is it community? Is it family, right? And all these things. Is it charitable work? And then you've got to ask yourself, well, what are those internal things that I also need in order to be happy? What are those values? What are those things that are really important to me? What are those core values that I hold very, very, very dear to me? And how can I live a life with being more in accordance to those core values, right? This is like straight up maths. This is just mathematics. It's just about saying, those are the ingredients. These are the numbers I'm working with. Let me just put them all together and fucking see what happens. Now, there may be times where you don't feel like putting them together, and that's fine, right? But those people that achieve that level that we're talking about of an emotional state in which they want are the ones that put it together regardless of whether or not they feel like it, right? And like I mentioned before, we're talking values, beliefs, and gratitude when it comes to internal things. Beliefs, asking yourself, what is it that I need to believe in order to feel happy? What is it that I want to believe in order to feel happy? Well, I'm going to give you a fucking insight now, which so many people overlook. You get to believe whatever you want to believe. You don't have to wait for the world to determine your beliefs for you. We think that that happens because we believe certain things, good and bad, empowering and disempowering, about people, places, things, and events due to past experience that in our mind has proven our belief to be correct. But we have to take it one step further and say, is that belief helping me? Is it serving me? Is it creating the emotional state that I want, or is it creating the emotional state that I don't want? And if it's creating the emotional state that you don't want, then what we have the power to do is choose another belief, because we chose that one. And if we chose that one, what is stopping us from choosing a new one? Never fail to underestimate or understand that every belief that you have, right, even if it doesn't feel like you chose it and it's just truth, there is a reason why it's not called fact and it's called a belief, and that's because it's a strongly held opinion. And therefore, we can change our opinion whenever the fuck we want. We can change our belief whenever we want because we can change our opinion. You chose the beliefs that you currently hold on to, even those ones that are deeply ingrained and maybe given to us by a parent or by a teacher or by someone in a position of authority, or even given to us by the universe because it's just based on an experience that we had that we now deem to be utterly true. You chose that belief. On some subconscious level, you chose that belief. In which case you have the ability to choose a new one. And my recommendation would be for you to choose one that empowers you and that helps you achieve the emotional state of happiness that you want. And then finally, the icing on the cake is gratitude. Gratitude has become one of those fucking sound bites, right? And you hear so many people talking about it all the time. Gratitude, gratitude. And it really is, in my viewpoint, it is the creme de la creme. It's the magic fucking pill. If you're going to take any sort of pill, take that pill, right? Is gratitude. And the reason for that is because when you're feeling grateful, you are firmly focused on the things that you do have and therefore not focused on the things that you don't. Why is that important? That's important because every single form of unhappiness comes from some form of comparison. You give me anything to be unhappy about, and I will give you a comparison. If we are unhappy in a job that we don't like, it's because we are comparing that job to another job that we potentially would like. When we are unhappy that we've lost a loved one, it's because we're comparing our lives now, not having had them, to our life before when they were around. When we are unhappy because we are sick, is because deep down we are somehow comparing our life to today being sick compared to what it was like when we were sick, or maybe the imagination of even not being sick. You throw any level of unhappiness at me and I'll show you the comparison. Now, what happens is that when we're exercising gratitude is we are flipping the comparison. The comparison is being flipped on its head. We're still making a comparison, but what we're doing is we're comparing what we've got compared to what could be worse. which is different to the comparison that most people are making throughout their lives. Most people are making the comparison of, this is what I've got and this is what I wish I had, right? Or this is who I am and this is who I wish I was. This is what I'm feeling and this is what I wish I was feeling. Gratitude is where you take that comparison, you flip it upside down and you say, this is what I've got and I'm so fucking grateful because I could have that and that is way worse. Way worse. This is where I am and I'm so grateful because I could be there and that is fucking way worse. I'm so grateful with who I am because I could be that person and Jesus fucking Christ, that would be a lot worse. Flip it on its head. The comparison is one of the most powerful things that we have, right? But it works in both directions. Comparison in the wrong direction creates unhappiness, sadness, depression. And comparison in the other direction creates gratitude, which is the ultimate form of happiness. So, ladies and gentlemen, there was a lot that we covered today during today's Power Hour. And to answer that question, how can I be happy? All you need are the ingredients. You just need the formula. Do that shit. Do that. 100% do that. Write out that formula. Understand what external elements you need, what internal elements you need, and what kind of semi-internal and external elements you need. And you know what? Do them. Engage with them. Embrace them. Allow them into your life, right? Make a point of ensuring that your day focuses more on those things than the other things that are creating the current emotional state, which is unwanted. Never underestimate the fact that this world is built upon mathematical equations. Never underestimate that fact. That does not mean it's unnatural. It's the most highest form of embracing the nature in which we live, right? It really is. All you need to do is go out there and look at nature to see the equations that are everywhere, to see that the recipes, they're everywhere. They're fucking everywhere. You just got to see them. And you realize that that is a huge part of your life as well. Look for the recipes, look for the ingredients, look for the equations, and embrace them and utilize them and use them in order to feel the way you want to feel. I love you all. You're amazing. For those people that are not yet Coaching Masters members and haven't yet bought any one of our courses, click that link that's in the description of the podcast or the live. Book yourself a call and let's talk about that, because you really need to be on our courses now. Fucking trust me, we're about to become the largest coaching academy in the world. And that if that hasn't yet already happened, it's happening super fast. And you want to be a part of that because we're going places. This is Google in the early days and I want you all on board. So come and join our courses, join our membership. These power hours are a tiny little snippet of value compared to what's in those. So make sure you do that. Love you all. You're amazing. You're powerful. For those Coaching Masters members, I'll see you in a minute over in the Coaching Masters community for TCM TV. Keep coaching your way to freedom. And I will speak to you all very, very soon.